Okay, this is the Silt versus role-playing game writing contest, workshop number 2, that is going to be focused on assignments. Assignments, of course, are the scenarios of the game. They are the main thing that both players and characters interact with. Well, that's not true. I guess suppose players also equally interact with face sheets. They are the most important thing for keepers, though. And they are also the most important thing in terms of our publishing needs. We are way more interested in assignments than we are faith sheets and journey scenes as a general matter. And so let's talk about this part of the contest. Let's talk about this submission track and the best way to write an assignment. We're going to be doing a lot of writing like we did in the last workshop. So the way this is going to work is I've divided up the workshop into 3 parts. And after I talk about like the things that I want to talk about in that part, we will then break to do a writing exercise. We will then come back, we'll share the results of the writing exercise, and then we'll continue with the second and then the third part. If you have specific questions about your submission, I'm going to request that you hold them until after the call, or either find me on Discord, or I will be hanging around on the call a little bit afterwards to talk about your specific questions. But if you do have questions about any of the, at a high level, any of the things we're talking about, please ask them. And so with all of that said, I will note that we have on the call a fairly qualified group in terms of writing assignments, and so that's interesting. So I will be really interested to hear all of your input and your insights, and indeed whatever you write for the writing portion. So let's start with part 1 of the workshop. I included my outline in the Discord post I just did. We're going to talk about the assignments generally, then we're going to talk about theme and concept, then the introduction portion of the assignment, and then the questions and opportunities portion. So generally speaking about assignments, I think the best strategy, or at least the best way to understand how to go about writing your assignment, is to understand what function they serve in the gameplay, right? They have a really particular kind of function in the gameplay. They are there to give the custodians or the players everything they need to start the investigation. That's really important. They are there to say, hey, here's what we're doing. This is what the assignment's about. Please go start investigating the assignment. The assignments are a somewhat skeletal story framework for the keeper. And they are what I like to call a toy box, like an inspirational toy box, or a toy box for play. The story framework thing is really interesting because if you think about like traditional modules and scenarios, like in more traditional mystery games, they tend to have like a really clear through line. Like there's an A to Z, like sort of assumed way that the scenario is going to play out. The characters are going to go here, then they're going to go here, they're going to talk to this person, they're going to find this clue, this leads to this, and then this leads to the final confrontation, right? They tend to be very lengthy in terms of how much is written, and they are much more like reading a story. Like they have like a plot, right? In CFB scenarios and in Silt versus, that is not the case. Here we have instead a story framework that has some hints about what might happen, and it has a lot of like big ideas in it, and it has characters and locations and other things that might be important, but there's not like an A to Z like flow of the story, right? The important thing in a TSV assignment is that the keeper has the big characters and locations and events that the things that might figure prominently in the story, and importantly how those things react to the events of the scenario and how they react to the presence of the custodians. It's a slightly different frame, right, for scenarios. That's kind of connected to this toy box idea. Just like there isn't like an A to Z plot in a CFB scenario, or in an assignment for Silt versus role-playing game, there is also there are not like predetermined locations for everything, right? Like this clue is not always found in this place. This character is not always found in this location. It's a toy box mode, meaning these are just a collection of materials that the keeper can grab and play with and put wherever they want, right? Wherever it makes sense. that can be kind of airdropped in. So it's a collection of fun elements to play with. When you're getting ready to conceive of your assignment or write your assignment, you want to keep a few things in mind. So the assignments in Silt versus role-playing game are stray or forgotten divinities. That means they are usually gods, but they can also be angels or saints. Just a quick primer on what that means. Angels are typically animals associated with the god, and saints are typically monstrous personifications of the god. Usually, like a person has been kind of transformed to be a saint. They're a hallowed person. Thank you, Gabriel. TSV RPG largely focuses on rural settings. That's another thing to keep in mind as you set about writing your assignment. The rural setting is convenient because it makes the communities that the custodians are going to rather isolated, and that's very helpful. It also forces the custodians to travel, which is important for the journey phase part of the game. And so I think you can't go wrong by having your assignment set in kind of a rural place. That said, they don't have to be. If you want to set your assignment in an environment that is like more urban or is maybe like right in the middle of Glottage, you can do that, but you want to maybe think about ways to capture a sense of isolation with the characters and stuff that are the focus of that assignment, or to otherwise recreate the idea of traveling in that context, right? So if we look at the Skyward Sprawl, which is one of the official assignments, that takes place in a city. But the isolation component is enforced by this idea that the assignment takes place inside this building. And the building, because it's in the middle of a war, like there's a war taking place inside that building, that big high rise, that creates an isolating effect, right? It prevents like those people from getting out, and it generally prevents people from getting in, right? So it kind of isolates it, despite the fact it's not in a rural setting. So rural settings are your friends. If it's not going to be in a rural setting, think about how you can create a sense of isolation in your setting. Also, another thing to keep in mind when you're getting ready to do your assignment needs a title. Obviously, the title I think should be a name, the name of the divinity, like just the straight up name, what it's known as, I think is a good approach. Or it could be a name that's suggestive of the stray divinity. You should probably avoid titles that are phrases and sayings. I'm not sure that doesn't really fit the sort of house style that we've established in the game. I don't think the judges are going to ding you for that in the contest, but nevertheless, just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now let's move on to theme, concept, big central idea, right? I think when you're writing your assignment, you should pick a concept, a central idea, a theme around which to develop your assignment. The reason why that's important is because that theme or idea acts as a touchstone for when you're writing the various sections of your assignment. So when you're like writing your characters, when you're writing your places, if you're stuck, you're writing moments and you're not really sure like what to do, you need some inspiration, you can always kind of return to your theme or your central concept to get inspired. At least I do when I'm writing them. And so I think that's a good place to start. Be thinking about what the theme, the central core concept is. It also gives the assignment a more coherent and even cinematic feel, which is important for gameplay and important for just the quality of your writing, right? So your assignment is going to feel much more coherent and believable if there is a through line of a theme or something kind of running through it. Now, I want to talk about verses. So most assignments have an additional verse on it, right? If you're on this call, I assume you know what verses are in the game. I'm not going to just say what that is, but your assignment for the contest does not have to have a verse. But if it does, I do think that the theme of your assignment should inform what the verse is about, right? Like the verses are really is a good way of directly connecting to that theme. It's a chance to show how the theme or the concept resonates in the custodians' lives, right? Like the theme or the concept, generally speaking, in the assignment is it affects the side characters, it affects the locations, it affects the environment of the setting of your assignment, but the only real way that theme can kind of resonate in the custodians is through the verse. So the verse is your way of kind of turning it back on the custodians. I also find it's useful to write the verse of the assignment last. That's what I do, because then you've had a chance to get really comfortable and familiar with your assignment, with the places and the people in it. And sometimes things happen sort of organically that you didn't expect while writing the assignment. And the verse, you have, it's almost like you have like the most information. Like now that you've seen everything that kind of happens in the story, now that you've seen what the characters do, now that you've seen how the theme works its way through different parts of the assignment, you can now take all of that and write a really sharp, focused verse that turns it back on the custodians, right? So I think writing it last is the best approach, but you don't have to, but it's just something to think about. Okay. I'm going to say a little bit about introduction and then questions and opportunities, and then we'll do questions generally about this part before we move on to the writing assignment. Okay. So the introduction portion of the assignment and also questions and opportunities, which are kind of two big linked parts of the assignment. I think this is probably the trickiest part of writing assignments and CFB scenarios. Although I will say, I don't think it's quite as tricky writing this part in the Silt versus role-playing game as it is for the Between and public access. Okay, I think it's significantly trickier in the Between and public access for reasons I'll get to in a moment. So you at least have that to be thankful for, I suppose. But basically, your introduction, this is the part where the keeper reads this part directly to the players in order to get things going in the assignment, right? Your goals with the introduction, you want the text to present the basic problem that the stray divinity poses. You want to explain the basics of the assignment, including any necessary background information or lore. Optionally, you can hint at the deeper reasons the Bureau is interested in this situation, right? Because it might not just be helping the community. There might be something bigger going on. If you look, for example, Sleepless Warden adds in that little extra bit about how, well, this town is like the personal like kind of nostalgic playground of a higher up muckety muck in the Bureau, and they're particularly interested in what happens here, right? Because of its historical significance. That's a thing. Sometimes, maybe the assignment and the situation that's going on is an embarrassment to the Bureau, and so the Bureau is keenly interested in like covering it up and being rid of it. Maybe there is some interdepartment problems, right? Maybe the military is trying to take advantage of the situation in your assignment, and the Bureau wants to get on top of that. And so you can also explore those ideas, right? There should be like a basic problem that this stray divinity poses, and then if you want, there might be like some deeper thing going on in the setting, right? You want to make sure that you present a few leads so the custodians can begin the investigation right away. So mention a few characters and mention a few locations that they can kind of get going with. And finally, you want to focus the custodians on the questions, and more on that in a moment. Now, what you don't have to worry about, and this is actually really different from the other games, what you don't have to worry about is you don't have to worry about, first of all, how the custodians receive the instructions for the assignment. The game absolutely does not care about this. It is never mentioned anywhere in the text of the game how the custodians learn about the assignments, right? They just do. Maybe they get phone calls, maybe they get like, mail or packages sent to them on the road. Who knows? We don't worry about it. It's none of our business. So don't worry about how the custodians learn about it. Just say what the assignment is. Also, you don't really have to worry about creating hooks for the custodians. The hook is the fact that they are conscripted into biased and they have no choice. That's the hook, right? So you don't need to worry about why are the custodians interested in this problem? Well, the Bureau doesn't give a shit if they're interested in the problem or not. Like, they are going to go do it, right? That's it. That's the only hook you need. Compare that to, say, public access or the Between, where you have to give those characters more of a reason why they might want to pursue this, why they're interested in it. In the case of public access, these are not professional characters. They are just people people hanging out trying to have fun and do some mystery solving, one summer. And so you have to have more of a way of like connecting them into the story. Same thing with Hargrave House. Left to their own devices, the hunters of Hargrave House will just go roam around fucking each other and monsters and doing bad shit that has nothing to do with anything. You have to give them a reason to like get involved and focus on the assignment, right? But that's not the case in this game. In this game, you don't have to worry about hooks. The hook is the premise of the game. That's the hook, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why it's slightly easier to write these. Now, as a general matter, the trickiest part of writing the assignment is getting the introduction to flow somewhat logically into the questions and opportunities. From a playability standpoint, this part of the assignment has to be reasonably airtight. You can't have logical inconsistencies between the introduction and the questions and opportunities. And you have to avoid the possibility of custodians pursuing some kind of question or theory that isn't a focus of the assignment. However, and this is a big however that makes these much easier to write than in the between and public access, the logic of the introduction and the Q&Os isn't as important in this game. And the reason why is because this is a world where gods are very commonplace and they are always doing their thing, and people just accept that gods are sometimes a pain in the ass and they have to be dealt with. And so that straight away takes away a lot of the pressure of making everything feel logical, right? Doesn't really have to feel logical. It's just a thing. Also, going back to the premise again, the Bureau to some degree is just telling you what's what. And so the custodians don't really have a lot of room to like stray into like other weird theories and things. They're being told what to go do, right? And so compare it to, say, public access, for example, where in the early part of the campaign, especially, this is the real world to them. This is just the regular ass real world. It's not some special world or setting. And so you have to make sure that the latchkeys don't start investigating some real world explanation that falls outside of the supernatural, right? And so, or like the Between. The Between's a great example here. One of the mysteries in the Between, one of the threats, is the vampire threat, right? The Limehouse Lurker. And they find these bodies that are exsanguinated. It's really important in that scenario that you absolutely lock down that it's a vampire, right? You cannot give Hargrave House the room to entertain the idea that it's something else, like, oh, maybe it's someone stealing blood for medical experiments. Maybe that's what's happening. It's not a vampire. No, bullshit. That's not what we do. It is a vampire, and the introduction makes that, it accounts for that, and the questions and opportunities account for that. A vampire is the only possibility in the Limehouse Lurker. That's not such a big deal in TSV RPG assignments, because in this game, the logic of the real world is not a problem, right? This is a world with thousands of gods, all kinds of supernatural divine stuff is always happening. The characters just accept the existence of these gods, and they accept that these gods are a problem, and they accept what they're told by the Bureau, right? And so don't worry too much about the logic part. What you do have to worry about when you're writing your assignment is you do have to worry about the questions and opportunities entertaining things that were not mentioned in the introduction. A big mistake that even very seasoned CFB scenario writers make is they will write the whole assignment, the characters, the locations, the clues, they'll write all that stuff first, and then they'll go write the questions and opportunities. And what they do is the questions and opportunities have information or make reference to things in the other parts of the assignment that are not mentioned in the introduction. This is a huge mistake, and I promise you, the judges, at least one of them, Alex, is going to penalize your entry for this if you do it. The introduction, if you mention something in the questions and opportunities, a character or a place, that better be mentioned in the introduction somewhere. That has to connect, right? So, and if I sound a little heated about it, it's because we have to edit lots of scenarios that make this mistake. And so please don't let yours make this mistake. It's a big playability issue. So if it's mentioned in the questions and opportunities, it has to be mentioned in the introduction. They have to connect, right? All right, so with all that said, there are some ways you can avoid this stuff, right? You can use establishing questions in the introduction to define certain things as true or to eliminate certain possibilities. I'm actually going to use the example of the Between again and the Limehouse Lurker because I really like this example. In the Limehouse Lurker, so the deal with the Limehouse Lurker is they find these exsanguinated bodies, right? And it's a vampire, and importantly, it's a small vampire, right? It's a vampire that is small in stature. That's all established stuff from that is a thing that's going to be the case in the mystery. That is something that we know to be true, and the way we sort of like make that true in the introduction of that threat is we ask a question to the players: what detail about the bodies makes you think that the vampire is little, right? And so then the players might say something like, oh, well, all the wounds are below the knee, or uh, or the person had to be like knocked out first before the creature could drain their blood, or something like that, right? um what that question in the introduction does is it focuses and narrows the possibilities, right? The only possibility here is that the vampire is small, right? And then that leads to the associated question, which is, well, if the vampire is small, is it actually a child, or is it an old vampire just in a small child's body, right? And so you can use questions that sort of like focus things for the players, right? That focus like the nature of what this is going to be about. Furthermore, you can just give the custodians lots of information at the start, right? You can just be really detailed with the amount of information that they're given, and that has the power of like sort of focusing the investigation and eliminating possibilities. To some degree, the Bureau, biased, has already done a lot of the investigating for the custodians, right? And the custodians are essentially starting in the middle of the investigation, not the beginning. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. You can make them quite information dense, and that information helps create some consistency between the introduction and the Q&Os. Okay, moving on to Q&Os. So your questions, these are the things that the custodians are going to be investigating. They're trying to answer these questions about the stray divinity. There are some pretty somewhat standard question types that you can do in your submission, but there are other possibilities as well. But some of the real common ones are, what is causing this? Where do we find the stray divinity? How can we stop the stray divinity? These questions are pretty standard types of questions, all related to just resolving the assignment, right? They usually unlock an opportunity that is like, okay, now that we know where the thing is, go to the thing's lair and destroy it, or whatever, right? Or something like that. You can have questions that are threshold questions, meaning that there's a question that the custodians have to answer first, and then after they've answered that one, it unlocks the real question, right? That is the how to actually resolve the assignment. There are types of questions that are, I call them unlockables questions. These are questions that that have nothing to do with resolving the assignment, and they instead unlock like new moves and new abilities and things like that. That would be really cool for the contest. Like if you do something like that in the contest, you want to like write a new move or something for your assignment, you can do that. You'll get points for creativity, right? Try to make sure it works mechanically and then it makes sense playability wise, but that's another option. One thing to keep in mind, I think, when you are writing your Q&Os is something that Gabriel and I focused on in this game, and this is not in the notes, this is purely off notes. One of the things that Gabriel and I focused on in the game is we wanted to make it so that the custodians could resolve the assignments in different types of ways, right? So maybe one question is essentially, how do we kill the thing, right? But another question might be something a little bit more nuanced, like how do we get the creature to act more productively in the community, or how do we get the communities to engage in a more productive, peaceful manner, right? So that's another thing to consider like providing different different question types, like one question that's more that that is like more of an aggressive or dangerous or violent way of resolving the assignment, and one question that leads to a more peaceful um, or more holistic, say, approach to the assignment, if that makes sense. In terms of like the actual complexity number, um, they have to equal 8 no matter what, or they can up to 8. So if you have a 2-part threshold question with with resolving question, the total complexity should not be more than 8. The complexity should be an even number. Um, Generally speaking, if you have multiple questions and different complexities, the questions that have a higher complexity should have an easier resolution, and the questions that have a lower complexity should have a more dangerous resolution. So there should be a trade-off there. That's not a hard and fast rule. That's just how we do it in the gauntlet. Um, but you definitely should try to keep the complexities to even numbers, and the total complexity to resolve the assignment should not add up to more than 8. Okay, so that was a lot. I tried to get through a lot of material there. I really want to get you all to the writing part. Do you all have any questions about any of this stuff up to this point? Or Gabriel, if you have any thoughts, or if anybody has any thoughts about this stuff, now's the time.
Yeah, just one thought to add for the framing of the assignments, just to make sure that, these situations are really big problems. Like there's such frustrating problems that they're sending you these weird agents as opposed to just sending in the military or ignoring it. Like this problem will not go away. And either there's a vested interest, like someone is going to profit off of this. Obviously, the conspiracy is going to do that anyway, or like it's going to be super embarrassing. So like just make sure that the stakes are high enough that they're again sending in these really weird, like you're not normal folks in this setting, like you're pretty unique with your skill sets and your sort of contract you're under. They're hoping that there's some way they can just like make this problem go away and let you figure it out. So as long as you set that up, I think you'll be in good shape.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to sort of add on to that, like, but not necessarily like they have like a vested interest in like having this problem resolved by you. It's just that they can't have it resolved by anyone else in particular. Like you can't be sending the military downtown if like you're setting your assignment in a more urban place. Like you have to like have some sort of subtlety there.
Sorry,
I
one more
think
thing to, sorry, go ahead, man.
Oh, I'll say there's something that Jason that you said last year at the writing retreat about making sure, and you've already touched on this earlier in the workshop, but making sure that you give the information that's needed to give, like all the pieces of information in the introduction, in the questions and opportunities. You use the example of the Limehouse lurker, but I also like the example of the what's the creature from the Black Lagoon in the between? What's the creature?
The creature of Cremor
Cremor
Gardens.
Thank
Gardens,
you,
yeah.
Criminal Gardens. Yes, where that is specifically a question: is this real or is this a hoax? And you're giving that question out. There, those opportunities are there, and very specifically that. Versus this is exactly a vampire. It has to be a vampire. What kind of
Yeah, that's
vampire?
true. That's a really great point. The questions and opportunities really are your way as the writer to to sort of shape the investigation and to show how you want to focus the investigation. And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I do think in this game, because it's all pretty straightforwardly about like stray divinities and taking care of stray divinities, I think it's probably there's maybe not quite as much room there for like these like more interesting like either or questions. That said, you have like if you take a look at the floating market, that's a really different assignment as compared to the others, right? There, it's not a stray divinity at all, really. There, it's a lot of stray divinities in some sense, right? It's a whole market full of stray divinities. And the problem really is not like one loose god or saint. It's the problem of a bunch of black market stray divinities and the trouble that that can cause in the community, right? And so, so you can kind of look at it in that way as well. I think as long as you know, if you're watching this and you have not looked at the assignments that are available, please do look at all the assignments that are available in the game so that you can get a sense of like the range and possibilities of assignment types and how the questions and opportunities can explore. We don't have time on this call to go through a bunch of examples, but they're out there, right? The key thing is to make sure that the Q&Os and the introduction match. They have to match. No matter what crazy thing you want to do in the Q&Os, make sure that the introduction, that it flows from the introduction, that there's a consistency there. There's a that it makes sense. Like if given all the stuff we've been given in the introduction, would the characters then ask themselves this question, right? Like that's something to think about. Now I will say we've had a long time to spend in CFB space and to know how players react to these games and how they play them. And I think that probably that airtightness is not as important as we like to think it is. I think a lot of players get the question and they just accept the premise of the game that that's the question they have to answer, and they don't worry too much about like whether it was logical or whether it was airtight, you know, like the connection. I think this is to some degree, this is more of a personal preference, right? Like I don't like the idea that like the players might be thinking like, well, this doesn't make any sense, you know, but I guess I'll just do it, you know? So, you know, but I do think that like for the contest purposes, I think the quality of your writing and playability of your entry is going to be better if there's a nice tight connection between the introduction and the Q&Os. The one thing you really want to avoid truly is mentioning a character or place in the questions and opportunities that is not mentioned in the introduction. That is a huge mistake. Don't do that. So please avoid that. But the other things you have some wiggle room, especially in this game. I think this game is a lot more flexible than the Between and public access are as far as Q&Os go. Okay. So with all that said, let's go ahead and divide up into our writing groups. So we don't have quite a bigger group as I thought we were going to have, and so we don't need as many groups. I had made 4 little writing group possibilities here, but I think we can probably get away with 2 now. I'm going to go ahead and just assign the groups. We will have Chaotic, David, and Gabriel in one group. We will have Steph, Amanda, and Corey in another group. Oh, I see. We were just joined by Martiniano as well. So in that case, let's do Chaotic, David, Gabriel, and Martiniano in one. Let's do Corey, Amanda, and Steph in the other. And I have 4 possibilities here. A god that is a roadside motel, a backyard divinity abandoned when the family moved away, a god inspired by a real-world fairy tale, or a divinity that is a high school mascot. Let's decide really quickly here on the call which group is doing what. Chaotic, I'm going to make you the informal team leader on your side. So do you have a preference?
2, because also Gabriel wants 2.
Okay, so a backyard divinity abandoned when the family moved away.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be my choice too, so cool.
Very good. Martiniano, we haven't heard from you yet, but it sounds like we've got 3 votes on backyard divinity abandoned when the family moved away. Love that. In that case, Amanda, Steph, Corey, do you have a preference on the other 3?
I do not, but do either of you?
The roadside motel is very interesting to me.
Love a spooky motel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll do motel.
Okay.
Are you okay with that? Awesome.
Corey agrees according to the chat. So, all right. So you all have the roadside motel. Once we take the break, we're going to break for, I think, probably like 20 minutes. We'll say, yeah, 20 minutes should do. We'll break for 20 minutes so that you can go work on this. I recommend going to Discord and doing a thread chat inside the writing contest channel so that you can all be together. And then if you want to jump onto a Discord call or something like that in a group, you can do that. But in any case, we will come back at actually, let's say 5 after. Okay, that'll give you 25 minutes to work on this part of it. This is a really important part of your assignment. So think about the things that are in the notes. Think about the things that I said and I mentioned. Really try to create that connection between the introduction and the Q and O's. Okay. Oh, and also for people watching this, what you're responsible for doing, you need a title for your assignment. You need to establish a theme or concept for the assignment, write a short introduction, including what is the basic problem, provide some basic details, present a few leads, and then write your Q and O's. At least one set. If you do more than one set, at least one set must be a way of resolving the assignment. Okay. There's no right or wrong answers here. These are not being judged. This is just an opportunity to chat and to talk and work on some of these things and think about these ideas and to do some writing. Okay, so we'll see you 5 after. Okay, so we're back and let's go ahead and, so one thing that occurred to us all while we were on break or while we were doing the writing exercise is that today's Super Bowl Sunday, which might account for the for the fact that the calls, it doesn't have as many people as usual. That's okay. I hope you're all enjoying football instead of writing about weird gods. Let's see what you all came up with. So the first group is doing, let's do the backyard divinity group, the backyard family god or family divinity that is now abandoned once the family moved away. Who wants to speak for that group? I want to just hear what you came up with.
All right. Things got edited while we were coming in. So we're calling the god the Joneses, the spotless apron, and grandmother spick and span. A new family, the Miles, have moved into this town, which we have not named yet. But things have been slowly changing into something odd. People's faces are shifting identically to one another's, each house becoming the picturesque of middle-class suburbia. The custodians are being sent here to investigate as reports from local authorities say nothing unusual is happening, but reports from tourists, travelers, and the Miles themselves have reported that these strange transformations have been happening. Direct this question to the custodian who is the messiest. What about this phenomenon lets you know that this god that is untethered, who is not tethered to a specific family, won't stop at the town's borders? And our questions and opportunities are: what keeps this god rooted here? Resolve the assignment by banishing or uprooting the god from its home so that new residents can live there in peace. And what beneficial aspects of the god can still be maintained? Resolve this assignment by finding a new role where the god can be returned to helping the people.
I like it. So that's good. Say again, what was the basic problem that the god poses? What's it doing to the community?
It's turning people to the same family over and over again.
Oh, it's changing the people into the Joneses, right?
It's
Yeah,
trying to recreate the perfect picturesque family unit.
Oh,
yeah,
got it.
Okay. I was
Oh.
aggressively writing in the background because we kept on changing the question opportunities, and I'm trying to write the introduction, and that's all we got.
No, it's
We
good.
didn't-
No, it's good. I like it. I like that I just want to make sure I understood what the challenge was, what the problem was. So they keep, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
They keep changing the family into this ideal family. That's intriguing.
Yeah, and that's why the local authorities won't report anything because they already been kind of changed.
Interesting. So that's intriguing. And remind me what the questions and opportunities were again?
What keeps this god rooted here? Resolve the assignment by banishing or uprooting the god from its home so that new residents can live there in peace. And what aspects of the god is what beneficial aspects of the god can still be maintained? And resolve this assignment by finding a new role that the god can
I like it. The questions and opportunities are good because you get the two basic approaches. The more pull it up root and stem violent approach, or the let's work with it and see if we can get it to behave more productively. I think that's really good. What do you all think, and we're going to explore this more as we continue the writing exercise, but what do you all think is the central theme or concept in this assignment?
We think it's tradition and community values.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. That's pretty good.
Like overbearing, tradition versus like freedom.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, so that's good. So that's something you can. That's definitely something you can return to, right? When you're writing like straight-laced, stuffy characters or moments that show this like rigidity versus this like more like loose, like kind of way of being, this more more libertine way of being. Okay, fantastic. Any other thoughts or additions from anybody in that group? Okay, let's go to the Roadside Motel group. Who wants to speak for that group?
Hey, I'm speaking for this one. So this assignment is the No-Tell Motel. The No-Tell Motel is a small, poorly kept roadside motel just outside of Glottage. The paint is peeling, the lawn is brown, and the statues are covered in weeds. During long nights on the road, it calls out to weary travelers who carry secrets and important information, compelling them to rent a room and stay the night. Many of these important political and business officials fail to ever check out and never leave. Biased agents have discovered that the tacky art littered across the grounds are silent watchers, saints that listen to and collect the secrets of motel guests. What the saints do with these secrets is unknown, and those who've kept them haven't been found since, presumably eaten by the motel, alongside any relevant documents or relevant memories of the secrets. Direct the following to a custodian with a hidden secret unknown to other custodians. As you approach the No-Tell Motel, describe its siren song and take the condition secrets kept. This condition cannot be cleared until the assignment is resolved. The Q&Os are at 2. Do the secrets die with the victims? Which unlocks the next questions. How can we destroy the motel without damaging the government's reputation? At difficulty 4. To resolve this assignment by destroying the motel, ensuring it looks accidental. How can we recover the secrets and use the No-Tell motel for our benefit? At 6. Resolve this assignment by exploiting the motel for its secrets.
I like this structure a lot because, it's a great introduction, really good, and the time limit that you had that was very well written. What I like about the structure here is what you're really exploring in this setup and presumably in the entire assignment is the idea of secrets, and I gather that's probably your central theme, right? Is secrets. Okay, so that comes through, and what I really like about the Q&O structure is it kind of front loads this idea of what we're really concerned about here is, do the secrets die or not, right? Like, are the secrets recoverable or not? Because that also kind of hints at biased like interest in it as well, right? And so I think that's really good. The Q&Os did not mention any, there's no stray information there, so that's good. But of course, it's kind of impossible in this because we haven't written the rest of the assignment yet. But it's good that like it all felt pretty well connected. I think one thing that you could probably do in the introduction is to, I'm curious about the role of the condition that the condition is playing, like the condition that's like, okay, here, everybody gets this condition to start. I would be curious to see like how that plays out in the rest of the assignment. The one thing I do wonder about is it possible in the introduction to be a little bit more leading with this idea of like, or like just posing the possibility that we are interested in whether the secrets die or not, right? Like the question of do the secrets die or not is a good one. But it might be worth emphasizing in the introduction that this is something that Bias doesn't know. Like we don't know if the secrets die or not. And so we're curious about that, right? Just so that, but I think that's like a one sentence addition, right? That really hammers that home. So solid, good, I love it. Yeah. Really good. I also like the little detail of the saints. I think is a cute detail. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts about that one? Okay. In that case, let's go ahead and go to part 2 of the workshop, which I like to call the more creative writing part of the assignment writing process. This is the more fun part to me. Part 2 is going to focus on what I'm calling the threat and dangers, locations, and then side characters. So the threat, and this is not a term that's used in the game, it's just what we're using for purposes of this workshop for clarity's sake. But the threat is what is the central danger or problem in the assignment. It's usually a stray divinity, but it can be something related to a stray divinity. So like in the case of the Bowered Companion, it is the Bowered Companion, right? That is the central threat. But in the case of the Floating Market, it's a little bit more diaphanous, right? Like it's not super obvious what is there's like the central threat, right? It's more like the threat of the place rather than a stray divinity. But in any case, in most cases for your assignment, it's going to be like the stray divinity that is the problem, right? The angel of the Dusk Mother, the Bowered Companion, the Hungering Roots, and so forth. Some things to keep in mind when you are writing the threat portion. The text of the threat portion should account for all possibilities imagined by the questions. This is especially important if the precise nature of the threat is not yet determined. Like if we don't really know much about this god yet, like if it's not so well defined, it's important that you don't accidentally answer questions or put in too much information in this part. So just kind of keep that in mind. You also want to make sure that you are giving the keeper enough to work with when it comes to how you describe the central danger, the threat. You want to make sure the keeper has a sense of the central danger's physical description. 3 descriptive details is usually pretty good here. What is it? If it takes a physical form, what does it look like? If it doesn't take a physical form, how does it present itself? Is it something like sound related, or is it a smell or something like that? Does it come in dreams? Mannerisms and quotes, if applicable. I will note that gods in this setting don't typically speak with language, and so that's worth pointing out. They don't have a language that we really understand, and so kind of keep that in mind. But I suppose it's possible that like saints might still have the capability of speech if they're not completely hollowed out and transformed, right? But if there's mannerisms in the way that they can be played, that's helpful for the keeper. Any powers and abilities that the threat has is really good. The ways that it affects the environment or warps the environment. And probably most importantly, the ways in which it might react to custodians, especially if there are special conditions that come into play in this assignment. How does it react to custodians that have that condition? So in the case of this little stray family god in the writing exercise, the roadside motel, if you have that condition still, when you go do X, like what does the central danger of the motel do? How does it react to you, right? You might include a note about that. So basically, what is this thing? How does it appear? What does it do, right? This section also contains a little thing that says, if the custodians fail to complete the assignment in time. This is a really, really important section in terms of keeper support. The idea here is, what will the threat do if left to its own devices? Like, what will happen if the custodians don't deal with this? This is a really important part of the assignment because the keeper has to be thinking about possibilities, right? The keeper will often have to think of reactions. The keeper will often have to think about, well, what's going on over in this assignment that the custodians have been ignoring for the last 2 sessions, right? Like the keeper has to think about those things. And this is your place to support the keeper there, right? You give the keeper some ideas about, what's happening off screen. What would happen if the custodians never showed up? What is, at some level, this kind of like really, really boils down to like, if we were to look really far in the future, like the worst case scenario here, what would happen? Like, how would things absolutely completely fall apart if this god is allowed to keep doing it? This is really, really important because it just helps the keeper imagine possibilities, and it helps inspire keeper reactions, right? Okay, so that's the threat. Then we have dangers. Dangers can be people, saints or angels, supernatural attacks, maybe things in the environment, like maybe like structures that are dangerous or traps. There are no real hard and fast rules here about what is a danger or what is not a danger. Just try to think really expansively about what sorts of dangers the custodians might encounter while investigating the assignment, right? This is a big part of the sort of toy box concept of the assignment. The dangers are things the keeper can grab and throw on the table as needed. If the dangers are people or they have personalities, you can write them like side characters, more on which later. Locations. So when you're writing locations, first you want to think about what is the geographical scope of the assignment. Locations can be all of the rooms in a single building, like in the miraculous clinic of the Bleeding Witness. Locations can be places on a single site, so like all the shops in the floating market, or the various factory and living spaces of Hungering Roots. Locations can be specific businesses and residences in and around a town or community, like in the Dust Mother. Locations can be a mix of localized and surrounding areas, like in the Sleepless Warden, where we have like town locations and sort of wilderness locations, right? When you're writing a location, you want to give them 3 descriptive details. What do the custodians see? What do they hear? What do they feel? What does it smell like? Things like that. And then you want to write a paint the scene question. A paint the scene question is a question that you pose to the players, and the answering of that question helps us learn something about this space, what it looks like, but also it explores an idea connected to that location. So a good paint the scene question does both things. Like it asks the players, what does this look like or sound like, feel like, but also what's it telling us about this place? So let's do some examples. Actually, I'm just going to go with my teaching example is my Dungeon World example, my Medusa example. So I love this example. Fantasy adventuring game. The characters are in the villa of a Medusa, a Gorgon, right? And so you ask the question, how do we know this villa is the home of a Medusa, right? What do we see that tells us that? And so the players might answer, well, all of the mirrors have been covered up with cloths, or there's lots of statuary around, or there's lots of snake motifs in the environment, right? I love that question because when you pose that question, it automatically starts the players thinking about things. They're thinking about Medusas. They're thinking about the environment. They're thinking about what does it look like? They're thinking about, importantly, the concept of a Medusa and her home, right? And as they answer the question, everybody at the table is building up in their mind an idea of what this looks like, and kind of getting buy-in to the place, right? We all believe this space now. We're all bought into it, and we're ready to do the thing. And we're also inspiring the keeper too. The keeper can take all the things we say and incorporate it in future scenes. So paint the scene, a very, very handy technique. Every location should have a paint the scene question that explores some idea about that location. A more maybe Silt versus appropriate type paint the scene question would be, what do we see around here that shows a god has been here? Or what do we see around here that shows that this family has lost their faith? What do we see around here that shows that this family used to be happier than they are now, right? Things like that. I think emotional responses are good as well. Okay, so that's the basic deal about locations. And finally, side characters. Again, with side characters, you want to consider the geographical scope of the assignment. A very localized assignment should have side characters who serve very specific functions in the story, or who are always found in very specific circumstances. A more geographically expansive assignment requires side characters who can be airdropped into the scenario. This goes back to the toy box idea, right? The basics of writing a side character are their name and then their role or purpose in the story. 3 descriptive details. How do they dress? What do they look like? How do they sound? What are their mannerisms? Their basic function in the assignment or how they interact with the custodians. So after you say what they look like, then say just a little bit about what they do, either in the town or how they respond to the custodians or how they respond to the events in the assignment. How are they affected by this stray god? And then finally, you want to have a quote. Quotes are basically just a thing that the character might say while talking to the custodians, right? Doesn't mean they're going to, but it's just something that they might say. I like them personally as a keeper. It's like my favorite thing on the sheet because I can think about when to say the quote, and the quote like helps me think about what that character might be like. Like it kind of gives that character a voice, and so it helps my role play. Quotes are one of your best chances to help the keeper look like a rock star. I recommend really spending some time on the quotes. Try to expand on the ideas presented in their description in the quote. Like try to like make the quote somewhat reflective of it or build off of it. Or maybe the quote suggests something entirely different. Maybe it gives us a different view of the character than what the description implies, right? Importantly, the quote is a chance for the side character's personality to shine. So really, really go for it. Like, think hard about giving this character a voice. This is your only chance to give this character a voice. It's their chance to stand out among the other 7 or 8 characters on the sheet, right? So think hard about it. For contest purposes, this is where creativity is going to come in, and I think the judges are going to pay attention to the quotes because the quotes are the kind of thing that get you excited and make you really fall in love with the character, right? Okay, so those are the fast basics on threats, dangers, locations, side characters. We're going to break up into our writing groups again, and now for your assignment, you are going to detail the threat. You've already kind of hinted at it in your 2 presentations, but maybe go into a little more detail. What does this spick and span god, what kind of powers does it have? How does it affect the environment? How does the motel lure people in? What does it do once it has you in the room? Is the swimming pool like part of its, is part of its way of capturing people? I don't know. But in any case, what does it do? 2 associated dangers. Maybe these are particularly dangerous side characters who have an interest in keeping the stray divinity covered up or protected. Maybe it is more wide-reaching powers of the divinity. Maybe there's a saint that is a problem that the custodians might have to deal with, or there's an animal, an angel that they have to deal with. But in any case, 2 dangers, and then 3 locations, and then 3 side characters. We will meet back up on the hour. So I look forward to seeing what you all come up with. Okay, we are back, and I'm excited to hear what you all came up with. Let's start with the backyard god, this god of making communities shiny and bright and acceptable. Who wants to speak? Let's start with the central threat. Like, what are some? Let's go deeper on this god. What do we know?
As we said before, the Joneses, the spotless apron, grandmother's spick and span. She's only ever seen in photographs, the grandmother figure in the background, her face always out of focus or outright scratched out. An apron with floral prints, hands wrinkled from age and welcoming arms. Her family is your family, is her mantra, and no one is quite sure where that thought came from. She uses her influence to make sure you do your part and maintain her perfect family. She's never angry, but sometimes very disappointed. She doesn't understand why her family doesn't call anymore. If the custodians fail to complete the assignment in time, more and more of her perfect families will spread to other towns. The politicians are constantly debating about her because she represents the ideal of what it means to have a family in the peninsula, but at the same time, they value their power. It is unclear how far it will spread before the military intervenes or before it's too late for them to intervene.
I like it. That's really good. What are some associated dangers we've got here?
The perfect family. The spotless apron is doing what is necessary for this town, and that is making it perfect. The custodians experience little things at first, their eye colors shift, a blemish that gets erased, but it does get worse. They won't even recognize themselves in the mirror anymore. And of course, no one with their description ever worked at Biased, and they've always lived in this little town where nothing unusual ever happens.
You could even imagine tying that to a condition, right?
Mhm.
Like you could imagine like, you could write in a condition that the custodians get whenever they interact with, with this part of the assignment,
Mhm.
in order to memorialize this, right? And to show that they are under the influence of the perfect family. Yeah, that's good.
And the second danger is do your part. The presence of the gods stirs a fervent a compulsion to tidy, clean up messes, even to demand others to do the same. Unfortunately, this world is full of idle and lazy people who don't do their part. The work is never done. If the custodians become ensnared in the grasp of this god, they may never leave this neighborhood again.
I like it. It wasn't part of the writing exercise, but I would be curious to hear from the group, from anybody, whether you were in the group or not, if we were to start thinking about this assignment in a slightly more expansive way, like beyond just like the effects um, of like the god directly on the custodians, like what sorts of people, for example, might be interested in slowing the custodians down, or might there be a hallowed saint that is, roaming around? I'd be curious if anybody has any thoughts of like in what other ways could, like, what other kinds of dangers might there be here?
I think some of the side characters that we wrote
We'll
could be
incorporate
dangerous.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's probably especially in this kind of assignment, that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, we can move
Neighborhood
on to this.
watch.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. What did you say, Gabriel?
Oh, basically like, neighborhood watch, like the worst
Yeah,
extremes
yeah,
of
yeah,
that. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I'd also be curious. Like, I'm also wondering if there's a danger that's like that is actually like somebody in government,
Yeah.
or that like actually likes the idea of this. Like you can imagine some sort of like fascistic government
Mhm.
entity
Yeah.
or person,
A
who's
sort
like,
of
yeah,
sort of family values,
yes,
political
exactly, right,
candidate, because
yeah,
these are
yeah,
the perfect voter base sort of thing.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, definitely, especially with how the threat part of it was written.
Mhm.
It just implied that there's someone in town that already believes that.
Yeah, I think that would be super. That's a super cool angle. Like this idea of like people, who like are really into this, and yeah, and kind of bring in those like sort of like fashy kind of like themes of like conformity and stuff. I think that would be super,
Yeah,
super cool.
yeah, like the town mayor or something of like just like going on a political campaign at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that could be a really good moment, honestly speaking, of like
Mhm.
seeing like these little signs on
Oh
like the
yeah,
on
yeah,
people's yards.
yeah. Okay. What do you have for what's the next part? Side characters, I guess, or locations?
Locations next.
Locations. All right, go for it.
Uh, Uh, the Jones, wait, cross that out. Miles' house, a perfect family house, welcoming and prettily decorated. And the interior shows the struggle to balance perfect presentation with the chaos of family life. It has a neat garden with a pool, barbecue, and a homemade swing from an old tree. A small rock garden by a fish pond shows signs of veneration. Paint the scene. How have the Miles tried to make their mark on the house, and what of the Joneses do we see bleeding through?
Oh, interesting. So it's like, how have they tried to express their personality, but instead there is this leaking in conformity? Is that the idea behind that paint the scene question?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah, that's interesting. What's your other locations?
The local park, a break of green shade from sidewalks that are hot enough to fry an egg, uniform swings, a slide that spirals downwards, and local mothers gossip when their children are off playing with each other. Paint the scene. What games do the children play with each other that remind you of your own childhood? And why does it unnerve you of how many details are exactly the same?
Oh, that's pretty good. I like that. Yeah, that's fun. I like those paint the scenes that sort of are like backdoor ways of sharing the custodian's backstory, right? Because they don't get that many opportunities to do that in the game. There's really specific instances, and paint the scene is a great way of doing that. But like through this lens, right? Through this like particular lens, which I find really fascinating.
Mhm.
All right, what else?
The public library. Everything seems out of touch. There's only magazines for women, sports issues, military books, and a lot of children's books. A dirty place with poor light that it hasn't been cared for in months. Paint the scene. What books seem out of place for this library, and where are they?
Oh, that's interesting. So it's interesting that the library is like not pristine. That's intriguing to me. Um, I'm curious what the thinking was behind that thematically.
I didn't write that one, so I can't
Who
tell
wrote
you.
that one?
It's sort of cultural decay, that
Yeah,
comes
okay.
with the town. I was
Ah,
sort of thinking of that.
no, I get that. Well, and also, I guess there's also like in some sense, I can kind of see like it's almost like saying like our sort of like conformist impulses and this almost like fascistic like way of being, we actually don't like libraries. Like libraries are places where you can go to learn and be an individual, and so we're going to let, so we don't care about that, and so it's untouched.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating. Yeah, that's good. Interesting. What was the paint the scene on that one again? Chaotic.
It is what books seem out of place for this library, and where are they?
Interesting.
I thought they may be, I don't know, The Catcher in the Rye or
Mm.
something like that. That's
Yeah.
been hidden somewhere. I mean, or I don't know, The Infinite Jest, maybe by
Yeah. Well, the
David
tricky thing
Foster
about
Wallace.
yeah,
Or
the tricky
Finsbury
thing.
Lost in the Fire, I don't know, by my friend. Because it was
Yeah. Yeah, I think the tricky thing about that paint the scene is that it's a setting where presumably those books don't exist, and so because it's its own world, and so I think you could, but I think you could probably like rewrite that paint the scene to where it's not like asking for specific titles, but rather like what types of books are you surprised to find
Okay.
here? Does that make sense? Yeah, like you kind of keep it a
Yeah.
little bit more broad, but otherwise, but I like the idea behind it because it kind of says something about the community, which I think is really important. This is such a community focused assignment. So, okay, cool. Let's move on to side characters.
Ardent Miller, head of the neighborhood watch, comfortably retired, neatly dressed, a suspicious tone to their voice. Ardent lives on the same street as the Joneses' house and keeps an eye on all goings on in town. Ardent can frequently be glimpsed through twitching curtains and will challenge anyone they see as suspicious with the confidence of a life without opposition. Quote, I can't help but notice that you've been parked here for almost 3 hours now, and you don't seem to have a tradesperson or a resident permit. Might I ask what brings you here? We don't take kindly to disturbances on this street.
Love it. Great character, top to bottom. Ardent is a terrific name. The quote is really good. The quote tells us so much about how that character operates in the world, right, and what they do. And yeah, really, really, that's it. Ardent is such a good name. This is something that I do a lot in when I'm naming characters. Is I have their first name be suggestive of something, like suggestive of their personality. You can go overboard with that, honestly. Maybe not in this setting, but in like more real world settings, you can kind of go overboard with that a little bit. But well timed, it works, right? Like, or you can even make it like ironic, like the series of characters in my games, which are like Temperance Head, Patience Head, Constance Head, like they are named in a way that like it's ironic because they're not really those kind of people, right? they are not patient people. They are, they are kind of like the opposite of what their name says. So yeah, that's another fun approach. Okay, next side character.
Miss Wanda Nara, head of Family Values Association, in her early 30s, always perfect hair, blue eyes, and a warm pie to offer to anyone. nor can be seen anywhere near the houses on that particular street, but only at night. Howdy, you all. Isn't this a beautiful morning?
Love it. Great character, kind of a danger in a way,
Mhm.
right? There's big danger vibes on this one, but I like her. Okay, what else you got?
Junie Sims, a rebellious child, brand new dress, recently torn and stained with grass and dirt, fierce scowl, bruise covered, carries a godslayer sword, aka a sharpened stick, and wears a helm, aka a repurposed antique offering bowl, determined to convert every one of the neighborhood children to her band of god hunters, probably something she once heard on a radio serial for grown-ups. Billy says that there's a god in his backyard too. It ate his pet rabbit, so we're gonna kill it. If you poke enough holes into its slimy god skin, we can let one the rabbits out. Wanna come? You gotta have the weapons to be in our group though, like real ones.
I like this character a lot because I find that when you have these really like focused, stylized scenarios like this one is, like it has a really like dominant, theme, and the high concept is so pronounced. It's nice to have these characters that kind of break that up a little bit, like they stand out in that way, and they actually give players, and indeed like just people reading it, they give them like something to hang on to. They give you something to hang on to, and they make the whole thing like a little bit more accessible. So I think that's a really good touch. You can also compare it to like in Hungering Roots. I think in Hungering Roots, the character that's the little kid that hangs out on rooftops, that's a similar kind of character, because they're not like part of the like brainwashed plant cult, right? Like they are sort of outside of it. Also the courier guy is another character kind of like that in that one. I like those characters that are almost like they're more sympathetic, and they're almost like stand-ins for the audience a little bit. So that's a good touch. You wouldn't want everybody to be like one of those like Junie weirdos, right? Or the lady with pies. You wouldn't want everyone to be like that, right? You would want like some balance there. So fantastic. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about this, or thoughts or questions about just writing side characters and locations in general? We didn't really get a chance to do a Q&A, but I know you all know the process really well here, so I didn't think we really needed to. But in that case, let's move on to the other group and talk about this roadside motel. Who wants to go for the other group, detailing the threat?
Corey, you want to take this one?
Yeah, kind of. Sorry, just struggling with my mute button there. So the big threat of the No-Tell Motel. Throughout the motel, there is background music, the siren song, which grows in volume as the motel consumes your secrets until they and yourself are gone, and all you can hear in your head is the music. The larger threat is if the motel is left to continue to consume its chosen prey, then eventually whole areas of the government become unable to function as the underlying secrets which sustain them are gone. Military state secrets are lost, destabilizing the entire nation. Then got the first danger, the front desk staff, the manager, assistant manager, and the night shift guy. Staff here are worshippers of the motel who wish to feed their home and master. They will try and expose custodians to the art saints, or otherwise keep them confined in the motel until they are empty of secrets, potentially becoming art saints themselves. And danger 2 is the art saints. They try and take your secrets and will protect the motel. The wall art and tacky statues scattered throughout the motel are hallowed saints, emptied of their secrets and hungry to replace them with new ones. They will they will whisper and entice the custodians to divulge what it is they're hiding. When a saint tries to compel a custodian to confess their secrets, it triggers the revelation move. Roll the focus.
Good. Yeah.
On a hit, the custodian is able to keep their secrets. On a 7 to 9, they divulge no secrets, but they forget something important.
Yeah, good. I love this. Because what I was going to say before you got to that last little bit there, Corey, was when you have this a high concept involving something like secrets, and that all the dangers like are kind of connected to, and that can be a problem, this is when it's really good to mechanize it, right? When you to add some mechanics to it gives it heft in the story and gives the players and keepers like something to kind of hold on to make sure that this part of it works, right? And so I like that you all added that bit in with the revelation move. I would even go so far as like, it was a little bit beyond the scope of this writing exercise, but if I was writing this, I would have like a proper custom move here that dealt with secrets and how it affects the custodians and what triggers, like what's the specific trigger. If the custodians still have that condition, does that make the move harder? That intro condition. So yeah, this is a great example. Yeah, it's a great example of sometimes you can't just rely on the descriptive words. Sometimes you do have to tie it to mechanics to give it weight in the story. And so and to show its importance and prominence. And so I really like that a lot, because otherwise, because you have to imagine if you hadn't included that, if you didn't have that revelation move at the end, what you would have instead is you would have this just incredibly abstract notion of forgotten secrets, right? Like it would be very, very abstract, and the table would spend a lot of time figuring out what that means in gameplay, or they'd forget it completely and they wouldn't engage with it, right? Either case, it's a failure, right? So it was wise to put that revelation move at the end. I think it really pulls it all together, right? It gives meaning to like a lot of what you all said there and the rest of it. I love it though. I think it's really great. I like the idea of the Saints are really intriguing. I would probably go in more on the details there. And I think if I was writing this, what I would do with those Saints is I would do pick lists. I think that's a great pick list opportunity where you have pick lists of like, what do these Saints look like? What are their physical details and features? Maybe even like a few pick lists so that you could mix and match and create different types of Saints or whatever. That's just again, a little beyond the scope of what we were doing here, but if I was like writing a contest submission, that's what I would do. I would do some pick lists to make that a more creative, fun thing for the keeper to do. So yeah, but very, very good. Okay, let's move on to locations.
Okay, so locations, the lobby with wood paneled walls, painted and repainted, a tarnished silver bell on the front desk, a stone cherub decanting water into a fountain full of rusted coins. Paint the scene. Someone in the lobby catches your attention. What are they doing to try and look inconspicuous?
A good paint the scene, I would probably change it a little bit, because a paint the scene question like that, if we assume that paint the scene questions are being directed to all of the custodians, you can pretty quickly have a weird situation where in this one location, the players have identified 4 whole ass new side characters that are weird and that you have to now cope with, which might be okay, but it could be a lot to deal with. You could reframe it slightly with the paint the scene. You could put a little parenthetical that says, paint the scene directed to just one custodian, or directed to the custodian who has the highest sensitivity or communion or whatever, right? Whatever the thing is. You could frame it that way, or you could just rewrite the question to say, there is a person who is catching your attention. Everybody, what about this person tells us XYZ? Then everybody just talks about that one person, right? In the early days when we were writing these CFB scenarios, we before we had kind of figured out exactly how it would work in play, we would have these paint the scenes that kind of did that, where they would invite too much detail where and suddenly you've got all these, like, you've got loads of random things going on that is like too much to deal with in one scene. So I think but I like it conceptually. I think thematically it's really cool, and the lobby itself is really cool as well. All right, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
The next one is the motel rooms. Stained and worn carpet with bald patches. Typical motel wall art, uninspiring despite its hallowed nature. The pervasive smell of old tobacco. And paint the scene. How do you know that you're being watched in this room?
Love it. Fantastic paint the scene question. I think what would be really cool with these motel rooms, if we look at the example of the Bowered Companion and the Miraculous Clinic of the Bleeding Witness, those two assignments have location types, which is a slightly different type of location. It's something new we did for this game. But basically, in the Bowered Companion, it's a type of location, which is abandoned house. And then in the Miraculous Clinic, it's like hospital rooms, right? And in those cases, you have a single unifying paint the scene question. Well, in the Bowered Companion it does. I don't remember what the clinic one does. But then you have like what are essentially pick lists or like other like little things to kind of create your own individualized room. So the way you could kind of write these rooms is be like, maybe you pick a theme for the room or pick like some little descriptive details, but then you still have that great paint the scene question. How do you know you're being watched, right? Again, very beyond the scope of this writing exercise, but I think that's how I would do it if I was writing this, right? I would have like almost like a motel room generator location, right? That kind of lets you create each of the different rooms. Fantastic. What else you got?
And the last one is the pool, over chlorinated water, a sun-bleached plastic side, abandoned pool toys, and paint the scene. You see a notebook turning to illegible mush in a pool of chlorinated water. What detail do you notice is barely visible on the emulsifying paper, which still establishes it as a government document?
Intriguing. There's a great way of tying the theme in again, right? So now you're pulling back into that secrets theme. Fantastic. Okay, let's go to side characters.
So we have Norman, the check-in desk night shift guy. Norman is nervous and fussy, overly attentive to the phone lines, sniffles when he talks. Norman is an open book. He knows no secrets at all. He's helpful when the custodians ask about the motel, but brusque if they take up too much of his time. And Norman's quote is, "Welcome to the No-Tell Motel, where all of your worries melt away. Is there anything I can assist you with? One moment while I just answer the phone." Next, we've got John No-Tell, the motel owner and manager. Old-fashioned suit and a silver-tipped cane, no-nonsense speech and fancy cologne. John has owned the motel for as long as anyone can remember. He takes himself very seriously. And John's quote is, "Some of our clientele are desperate, full of shame. But after a night at the No-Tell Motel, they feel invigorated and proud, all shame lost. That's the power of the No-Tell Motel." And finally, we have Miss Judy Gator, a guest of the motel in the process of being eaten by the motel. She's wearing fine clothing and a mismatched outfit. She often forgets or simply misses words. She smells strongly of pool chlorine as if she forgot to shower after swimming. Judy acts with a sense of importance but cannot remember why. She hints at knowing important things but cannot articulate what they were. And her quote is, "Oh, hello, dear. Can you remind me where I am? I seem to have forgotten. I was doing something important just a moment ago, I'm sure of it. This music is so loud."
Fantastic. All excellent, no notes. You know, if I was writing this, one thing I would be thinking about if I was writing this, like if this assignment has very distinct like genre conventions to it, right? And genre touchstones. Like you think noir, you think David Lynch style surreal horror, you think old Hollywood genre tropes. You might think of you might even go into like more of like a comedy realm, right? Like with like, you know, comedies and things that take place in hotels and motels. And I think it would be fun if I was writing this assignment. I think it would be fun to give the characters names, at least first names, that hint slightly at that show like a winking knowledge of the genre, right? I think that would be a lot of fun. Like I think my desk manager would definitely be called Basil, right? After Basil Fawlty, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. But you could definitely see, like, I think there's like some space to do that as well. Also, if you were to do those rooms in that sort of like generator motel room pick list thing that I kind of suggested earlier, that would be a really good place to put some of those like genre conventions as well. So yeah, good stuff. Oh, I see a note here, Judy Gator, because she's an adjudicator but is forgotten. That's pretty good. Was that on purpose? Oh.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
Corey as
that's
well.
good. Oh,
Corey
that's
had to
good,
really
yeah.
like. I mean, Corey's ideas are wonderful. She's just
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I
Awesome,
like
awesome
it.
stuff. But yeah, the name Norman because of Psycho.
Oh
and
yeah,
the
okay, good.
Adjudicator.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you got it. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
on top of it. Yes. I don't know how I didn't get the Norman thing. Yeah, that's good. Fantastic. Yeah, good. Well, yeah, well, we're all on the same mindset there. Fantastic. Let's go. If there's no other questions or thoughts about locations, side characters, and dangers, we'll move on to part 3. Part 3 is truly the creative writing portion of the assignment. I think it's the most fun part of writing the assignment because it's just straight on pure creative writing. Moments, clues, and rewards. Okay, so moments. The important thing here is that moments are mechanical free agents. They have no specific mechanical, structural, procedural function in the game. They are to be used however the keeper wants to use them. Popular uses include keeper reactions, like whenever the keeper has to show something horrifying or something dangerous or complicated. The moments are a great thing to sort of rely on because they usually are cool, scary things. They can be used to set the mood whenever, say, you are moving into the investigation phase or moving out into the journey phase. Maybe a moment is there to kind of memorialize that. They can be clues, right? A moment can absolutely be a clue. I use moments as clues all the time when I'm running these games. They have lots of different functions and purposes. They're really, probably their biggest purpose is just to inspire, right? They are the most colorful part of the assignment sheet in terms of just flavor and detail and description, just pure, raw, descriptive, cool shit. And so they really, they kind of just inspire the keeper, generally speaking. As a writer, moments are your opportunity to really flex your creative muscles. Because there are no rules here, you should make them as big as you can. The bigger, the better. The more descriptive, the more horrific, the more exciting. Just go for it. That you can't mess anything up. All you can really do is just impress, right? So I say go for it. But of course, if you need to, go back to your theme or your high concept if you need some inspiration. Clues, almost as wide open as moments, if I'm being honest. I want to talk about the distinction between lowercase c clues and capital C clues, right? Everything in the story can be a clue, okay? A lowercase c clue. More precisely, everything that happens in the assignment is context for answering questions and pursuing opportunities. It's all important, right? But a capital C clue, an uppercase C clue, is what counts for mechanical purposes. That's the only real difference. Whatever we note as a big C clue, it just means it has mechanical significance for the answer a question move. Everything that happens in the story is important. It's all context. It's all relevant to the investigation. Okay. Now, what sets a capital C clue apart? Well, not much, truly. In Silt versus role-playing game, it's almost impossible, I would say, to write a clue badly because we're in the realm of divine manifestations, of supernatural occurrences. Nothing has to make perfect sense. If you compare it to Brindlewood Bay, you can kind of see the difference. In Brindlewood Bay, which is a much more grounded setting and which deals with a much more focused, grounded investigation, which is murder investigations. In that case, in Brindlewood Bay, the clues have to be a little bit more, plausible, I think, than the clues in Silt versus has to be, right? And so you can kind of just write whatever is a cool idea, and it's on the players to make it make sense, right? It's not your job as the writer to make it make sense. It's not the keeper's job to make it make sense. It's the player's job to make it make sense. There are some things to remember, though. A clue is something that would get the custodian's attention. That's important. It's something that does not conclusively answer a question by itself. So you cannot have a clue that is by itself the answer to a capital Q question. Some of the clues in your list should be connected to specific questions. I find that's helpful. If you have multiple questions that are available for the custodians to pursue, it's nice if a small handful of the clues are more pointed towards those, a particular question. I think that just kind of helps the keeper a little bit. Some clues should be more open to interpretation so that the keeper has some flexibility. Others can be more detailed, which help inspire the keeper. So clues, there's a whole range of things. I think it's all about finding a mix and a balance, right? You want some clues that are really wide open to interpretation, some clues that are highly, highly detailed. This is actually a big difference between Gabriel and I on the call. When Gabriel writes clues, the clues tend to be much more detailed. They have a lot of like visual detail, they have a lot of like sensory detail. And that's awesome because it helps inspire you as the keeper to run the scene. It gives you things to think about. When I write clues, they tend to be really, really wide open. They don't have a lot of detail, and they're very open to interpretation, and that makes them very flexible. That means they can be used in lots of different places, and the keeper gets to kind of put their own stamp on things. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, except to say, I think your assignment should have a balance. Some nice detailed ones, some more open-ended ones, some clues that point towards one question more than another, some clues that are much more widely applicable. Just try to find a little balance there. Something you can do with your clues is you can possibly incorporate gameplay elements into the clues. This is a little, I wouldn't go overboard with this. I wouldn't do it a lot, but for example, you could have clues that are also items that the characters can add to their altar, right? So they get like equipment. You could have clues that once they're found, they inflict a condition. You could have clues, I suppose you could have a clue that triggers a move. That would be pretty big, but you could try it. You could have clues that are made up of different parts. Like the clue is, it's like, you find a slick of liquid substance, which is pick one. Okay, it's a purple goo. Oh, it's some kind of grease. Oh, it's candle wax or something like that, right? You have the clue is broken up into some options that the keeper can pick from. There's a few clues like that in our assignments that we've published. You can have these little special clues. I wouldn't do it a lot, like maybe no more than a handful of your 20 clues in your assignment. But if you do it, it's a nice way of kind of making, makes your assignment stand out from a creativity standpoint. So maybe worth doing. But clues are otherwise pretty wide open. You can kind of write whatever you want because the players are going to make sense of it. Rewards. So rewards are what the custodians get after they resolve an assignment. When you're writing your rewards, just keep a few things in mind. One, rewards are how we memorialize the assignment. They are a way to make the resolved assignment a permanent part of the campaign's tapestry. When you're running these campaigns, especially the early assignments, it might be 10 sessions, between, you might do that one assignment and then 10 sessions later, you're still going. You've probably forgotten about that early assignment. You haven't been thinking about it much. It was so long ago. So the rewards exist as a way of memorializing the assignment. They are an item or a character or a thing from that assignment that the players can kind of, they have to sort of remember that we did this, right? Rewards can grant new moves. They can involve certain side characters. Those are always very popular rewards. For purposes of the contest, if you have some rewards that have moves or side characters involved in them, you can certainly, that'll help your assignment stand out, and I recommend at least trying it. And of course, a few of your rewards can be a memento from the investigation, right? So take a look at the rewards that are on the published assignments to get a sense of what types of things are out there, what types of things we've done, and then you can adapt those things or have them inspire whatever you create. But the key thing though is these are just little bonuses that the players get to take away from the assignment. Now, we're gonna do our last writing assignment or writing exercise. Probably just, let's just aim for like 10 minutes. This will be a pretty quick one. 3 moments, 3 clues, and 3 rewards. For those 3 rewards, please don't just write a memento from the investigation. That would be cheating. And also a special verse. We talked about that at the early part of the workshop. If you want to do a special verse connected to your assignment, now that you've seen more of your assignment, if you want to write a verse as well, you can do that. So let's take 10. In interest of keeping the time tight, I recommend just quickly assigning the writing things to each other and then just getting it done so we can meet back up. So I'll see you at 10 till. Okay, so let's just wrap up our workshop really quickly with hearing these moments and clues and things that you all have written. And then if anybody has any questions, generally speaking, about writing assignments, I'm happy to answer those. I'm sure Gabriel is as well. And then I will be sticking around after the call is over and not recorded in order to talk about specific questions and things. So why don't we begin with, let's begin with the backyard god, Spick and Span, the Joneses. What's the
Okay.
apron name? I always forget the apron name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
Spotless apron.
The spotless apron. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
the verse of nostalgic yesteryear. Each custodian narrates a time when they were sat down by their elders to listen to a story of better days. Moments. Little political signs stationed up in yards. A vote for adjudicator marigold is a vote for family. An old cinema that's repeating over the same movies, short films in black and white about family values and the dangers of sex. Raised voices behind a door which opens to reveal a perfect happy family inside. Doors and windows of each house on the same street and open in perfect synchronized movement as identical smiling neighbors emerge, wave in silent greeting, then retreat. Clues. A fresh coat of paint being applied to an untarnished wall. A window repeatedly fractures even when replaced. A glimpse figure in upstairs window pressing against the glass helplessly, a shadow near one of the houses. It can't be seen what or who he is as it disappears in a second. A broken child toy appearing in an unusual place each time it is discarded. A forgotten leather album with locks of baby's hair inside. A cartel on the side of the street. It seems from an old local called Guns Are Us. Rewards. A piece of god hunting equipment from Junie. Ask what's custodian what it appears to be, and another what it actually is. Add it to your altar. An antique broom that is with a well-polished handle that fits perfectly in your hands. Add it to your altar. A baking sheet of cookies, an odd flavor that only grandmas would love. Add it to your altar. And a home sweets home sign, you've yet generically familiar design. Add it to your altar. An old small ice cream machine. Add it to your altar.
Fantastic. Those were great. A lot more than we asked for, so that's great. You are well on your way to finishing writing this assignment. Those were fantastic. I also really liked the verse. The verse was super cool. Let's go to the other group, the No Tell Motel. Who wants to go through that?
Yeah, I got this. Just bear with me 1 second. So, yeah, for moments, we've got a pair of hands stretch out from a pastel floral painting, reaching towards someone. A siren song grows louder in your mind. For a moment, you can think of nothing else. And then words on a page fade away to nothing in front of your eyes. You can no longer remember what secret used to be there. And then clues. A mirror is revealed to be two-way. The guest ledger contains a familiar name and a strange symbol on a room key. Rewards. A little bit of context for the first one. We added in specifically that Ms. Judy Gator was formerly Adjudicator Halpert, but is unable to fully recall herself. So one of the rewards is an IOU from Adjudicator Halpert, promise scrawled and signed on a no-tell motel matchbook. A handful of instant coffee packets and packaged tea bags, which make a weak psychotropic tea, and a no-tell motel embroidered towel, thick and fluffy. And we did a verse of lost shame. Each custodian describes something in their past which they were once ashamed of, but no longer feel the need to hide.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. That's really good. Yeah, that's that sort of like taking the theme and kind of inverting it and pointing it back to the custodians, which is so what the verses are so great for. Okay, awesome. I love it. Those are all really, really great. No additional thoughts, except I really hope you both groups continue to explore these assignments and maybe write them. I don't know. We'll see. I think it'd be really cool. Does anyone have any questions about writing assignments? Any particular things that you want me to go over in more detail? I know that I was mostly just trying to power through things so we could get to the writing part of the workshop. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions or troubles you might be having. Gabriel, if you have any extra thoughts you want to share about the process, or really David or Amanda as well, who have like official publications in our various games, if you have any other thoughts about writing scenarios for CFB or specifically for Silt Versus as well. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
A general question, because like this particular assignment or reward just made me thought of it. What about rewards that repeat from like different assignments? Because like the psychotropic tea does like
Yeah.
show up in the hungering roots as well. So like, what are your thoughts on that?
I guess it's okay. I mean, I think that like if you can like make a little shading on your submission that makes it particular to that submission, I think that's probably fine, right? I mean, there are probably lots of different psychotropic teas in the world. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that too much. Yeah.
That's in general, just thoughts on assignments, I guess, and maybe more what makes it Silt Versus hopefully is thinking expansively about the world and the setting, and how again, these assignments are problems because they're affecting communities. Someone is going to gain or lose from it, and who lives in that place, and try to have at least a variety of possibilities. Maybe there's the weirdo who is getting along just fine with this monstrous god, or even is worshiping it. There could be, once you kind of have your central theme, you can think about like opposing forces that are there that make it a little more complicated for the custodians. I also have had fun exploring the theme that you're indebted. So you're a custodian for many different reasons, and that might be purely by force. And so maybe you have your own personal agendas. That's even one of your end of session questions, is rebelling against your orders. So you can kind of seed in opportunities for maybe selfish motives or rewards. The floating market does that. So just think, there's nothing wrong with having a very focused assignment that's a very straightforward problem, but it can be a bit more rewarding to paint the world a little bit and think about how this affects the landscape, how it affects the community, and that just to get that bigger picture that just will give the keeper and the players more little hooks to kind of seize on, I guess.
I love that note. And I'll say from like a sort of game standpoint and gameplay standpoint, this was not, I've done other workshops that were more like that didn't have a writing component, and they were a little bit more detailed in terms of like the sort of like art of writing these things. And one of the things that I've talked about in those workshops is you can do your assignment or your scenario a big favor by understanding the other parts of the game, right? And in this case, the other parts of the setting. And like, so Gabriel's point to like, what does the Bureau want of the custodians? Like, what are the circumstances the custodians find themselves in? What are the end of session questions that the custodians might be trying to answer yes to? How can you support that? But also look at other parts of the game, like, what are some like conditions that I can kind of play around with? What are some special rules that I can, what are some rules of the game that I can kind of pull into my assignment? How can I do that? How can I work in stuff related to the verse of history or the verse of prophecy? Like there's all kinds of like, you can think expansively in terms of the setting. You can think expansively in terms of the custodian's goals. You can also think expansively in terms of the game itself. Like all these parts of the game like kind of exist in their own little world, but they are part of a bigger game. And so I think whenever you can work in other game elements as well, it's a really, really good thing to do. So any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, David.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, in terms of some like holistic thoughts on like kind of assignment, threat, mystery design in general, because as I said, I haven't actually written anything for the Silt Versus yet. So the more generic things, I think, but I think one of the things I agree with, obviously with what Jason said earlier, which is like, obviously it's not your job as the writer of an assignment to have the answers to the questions and so on and so forth. But the sort of the contrary point to that, I think, is like have an idea of what story you are trying to tell with the assignment that you're writing, and make sure that all the bits and pieces line up so that story can be told, sort of thing. So it's like, and sort of coming down to things like, obviously, if you've got questions, then the clues that you provide have to, even if you don't necessarily know how they'll answer those questions, they have to be pointing towards it. It's like, if you're not, like, you know, to take an example of, like, there's no point in putting loads of details in about like murder weapons and stuff if you don't care about how a murder happened. That's just irrelevant at that point. You want clues that actually support the answers that the players will be coming up with. You obviously want the as we discussed, you want the sort of the ways of resolving it to make sense with what they've been presented and what they're likely to discover. Side characters and locations should be people that they're actually going to meet and places they're actually going to go. And if there's an obvious, like, if there, you know, if the whole theme of it is like there's an ancient thing that's lurking in the background, then, you know, you probably want a location that's like an archive or a library or a museum or something like that that backs up those sort of, what would be the, if I were looking at this as a player, where are the places I would want to go to? And
to back up this point, the biggest
Yeah.
mistake I made in public access was not including a library in that very
Yeah.
first mystery. It is the number one mistake I made in writing that game, is that mystery, that first mystery, Escondido Street, does not have a library, because literally every group I've ever played with, someone wants to go to the library, and I did not count for a library. And that gets to David's point. Like, the reason why I overlooked that is because I wasn't thinking about what the players might want to go do. Right? I had like an idea of how I thought it was going to go, but I didn't quite marry it perfectly with what the players were going to want to do. And this is the real art of it, right? I mean, this is where editors are helpful. This is where people who have been in this space for a while are helpful. They can help you with those blind spots. But this is the art of it. I mean, this is, you know, the assignments by and large are a creative writing exercise, in my opinion. The structure of questions and opportunities aside, I think that they're largely a creative writing thing. But there is a lot of benefit to understanding how games work, understanding how people are going to use this material, right? And I think that's to David's point, like, just how is it meant to be used? How do you intend for it to be used? But also, how do you think the keepers and the players in particular, are going to use it and react to it? And you want to try to anticipate that. To that end, something you can do with your locations and your side characters is you can have a variety of locations and side characters that are individual representatives of a bigger faction, right? So, you know, this side character represents this, you know, nosy neighbor, but what they really represent, like, they are a nosy neighbor, what they really represent is the feelings of all the people in this neighborhood, or, you know, like, or this character is a representative, you know, this character is like some kind of government apparatchik, but what they really represent is the government's viewpoint of all of this, right? And so that's another way you can kind of think about it. But yeah, it's an art. You know, it's I think it's what separates the good submissions from the, you know, not quite as good submissions, is the ones that really think about, like, how it gets used in play, you know, and what it tries to anticipate use, while also, you know, having a good idea of how you want it to be used. It's a balance. Yeah, it's a good point though. Well, we're a little bit long on time, so at this point, I'm going to pause the recording. If you're watching this, and I hope you found something useful and helpful for writing your own assignments. If you're here, I hope you found the writing exercise to be useful. If nothing else, for everybody, I hope that this shows, like, how easy it is, I think, to just grab an idea and spin it out and to get some stuff written down, right? Like, both of these writing exercise assignments are probably like halfway there, you know, like they're pretty far along, you know, so it's don't be intimidated by it. All right, at this point, I'm going to wave goodbye. Bye.